From Mythos to Mechanics, Empirical Reconstruction of Toroidal Vortex Morphology and Particle Clustering in Viscous Media. Author, Ebony Nard, Independent Researcher. Date, June 16, 2026. Abstract. For millennia, human cultures have recorded complex, repeating geometric motifs, such as braided rope networks, central abdominal spirals, and symmetric biological contours, assigning them mythological, alchemical, or theological significance. This paper presents a definitive paradigm shift, stripping away historical symbolic overlays to expose the underlying classical physics responsible for these forms. By subjecting high-density, viscous mud slurries to controlled, phase-locked acoustic frequencies on a horizontal boundary plate, we demonstrate the direct, reproducible translation of energetic fields into physical, three-dimensional structures. Crucially, this research provides undeniable physical evidence, including hardened material casts and real-time video recordings, proving that these historical symbols are literal, empirical blueprints of fluid dynamics, spatial pressure gradients, and toroidal siphons. This work effectively closes the loop on historical interpretation, establishing a purely mechanical, scalable framework for particle clustering behavior across mediums. 1. Introduction. Deconstructing the symbolic overlay. Historically, when human observers witnessed self-organizing geometric matrices in nature, the brain applied a creative, psychological overlay to interpret the phenomenon. Complex fluid loops were stylized as mythological figures, e.g., mermaids, dragons, or serpents, and high-density, localized pressure nodes were interpreted as sacred anatomical centers, e.g., the abdominal vortex or belly, in alchemical and deity iconography. Previous literature has treated these artifacts strictly from a cultural, anthropological, or artistic perspective. This paper achieves what no prior study has accomplished. It bypasses the symbolic wallpaper to analyze the structural source code. We propose that these cross-cultural geometries are the inevitable, mechanical consequences of field forces acting upon mass. When material is subjected to sustained wave energy within a bounded system, it must track along the paths of least resistance, organizing into predictable, geometric envelopes. 2. Methodological apparatus and boundary conditions. To isolate these structural laws from subjective human imagination, an empirical laboratory setup was engineered to observe particle migration in real time. Medium. A highly calibrated, high-density viscous mud slurry. The choice of a viscous medium is critical. Unlike low-viscosity fluids, such as water, which immediately dissipate energy, a viscous slurry introduces internal fluid resistance and mechanical dampening. This acts as a physical memory, slowing down wave track dissipation and allowing the material to hold its structural folds. Driving mechanism. A localized acoustic transducer, subwoofer system, driving a 300 mm horizontal boundary plate, operating via precise integer harmonics to establish stable standing wave fields. Phase stabilization. Frequencies are locked into a precise plate resonant frequency, PRF, discovered experimentally for the specific mass and apparatus. 3. Empirical evidence and mechanical analysis. Unlike theoretical papers, this framework relies on direct, physical proof generated on the bench. The structural transition from dynamic wave mechanics to permanent material form is documented through three distinct physical phenomena. A. The basal boundary and tool shearing, the flat back. A primary piece of physical evidence in our casts is the stark structural dichotomy between the organic, rounded upper contours and a perfectly flat underside. Acoustic lift versus gravity. While the vertical kinetic energy of the speaker pushes the dense slurry upward into three-dimensional, rounded, noodle, or rope geometries, the baseline horizontal plane of the plate continuously flattens the bottom interface. Mechanical extraction. The physical act of sliding an extraction tool underneath the synchronized mass to scoop it off the plate shears away the bottom curve. This proves that these geometries do not form in free-floating isolation. They are inherently bound to a flat, solid baseline plane, explaining why ancient architectural reliefs representing these forces are universally flat on the back. B. The hydraulic siphon, the deity belly deconstruction. In historical iconography, a prominent spiral or loop at the center of a figure's torso is frequently observed. Our real-time video documentation strips this mysticism down to pure fluid mechanics. The vortex sinkhole. When a stable standing wave is locked on the plate, it establishes a severe pressure differential. The center of the pattern forms a low-pressure hydraulic siphon. Material accretion, rather than a symbolic spiritual center, this zone acts as a literal mechanical pump, a self-sustaining vortex that draws surrounding particles inward. The material folds in on itself, continuously fueling a centralized, elevated node. C. Continuous phase tracking and closed-loop containment. Physical casts demonstrate that different material densities sort themselves along localized pressure gradients in real time. For example, in a multi-component slurry, an independent track of high-density material, the orange zone, will physically sweep downward, wrap entirely around an isolated, low-pressure mass pocket, the brown zone, and loop back upward to anchor into a stable baseline boundary, the blue zone. This proves that the tension of opposites, noted in ancient texts, is actually temporal phase coherence. By maintaining absolute phase lock long enough, the wave vectors create a physical mold out of thin air, forcing particles to cluster into self-contained, symmetric vessels that mimic biological body plans, such as helical myocardial bands or cellular boundaries. 4. The unified field matrix, from cosmic to quantum. By focusing entirely on the forces rather than the medium, this research establishes that particle clustering behavior is fully scalable and bound to the same geometric math across the entire physics matrix. The plasma electrical state. At the high-energy, high-velocity scale, electrical currents flowing through ionized gas naturally generate cylindrical magnetic fields that squeeze particles into braided, knotted electromagnetic ropes known as Birkeland currents or Z-pinches. The mechanical, fluid state, our bench, at the high-density, low-velocity scale, acoustic radiation forces squeeze and sort viscous mud particles along standing wave nodes, producing the identical braided, rope, and noodle matrices. The universe does not change its core organizational blueprints, it merely shifts the medium. Whether the compression field is driven by electromagnetism in plasma or by kinetic pressure in mud, the geometric distribution of mass remains identical. 5. Conclusion and future directives. This paper effectively concludes the historical and interpretive chapter of cymatic and fluid phenomenon. We have demonstrated that the geometric patterns recurring throughout human history are not arbitrary symbols, mystical secrets, or products of pure human imagination. They are the rigorous, observable, and reproducible footprints of physical matter responding to sustained field tension. With the historical deconstruction fully verified by physical evidence, the mystical framework is entirely obsolete. The next sequence of research will focus exclusively on the raw, hands-on manipulation of the viscous medium. Moving forward, the sole directive of this lab is to utilize precise frequency modulation, variable viscosity tracking, and boundary controls to isolate, map, and output the complete library of physical geometric shapes possible within the acoustic matrix.